The boardroom fell into absolute silence. Vanessa Hartwell's face drained of every drop of color as the compliance alert flashed across the main screen. Red text, bold letters. 4.7 million euros in immediate GDPR violation penalties. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for oxygen it couldn't find. Every executive at that mahogany table turned to stare, not at the screen, but at her. The woman who just spent 20 minutes presenting her revolutionary AI trademark system to our European partners. The woman who'd looked me dead in the eye 3 weeks earlier and said, "You're luckier than you are smart, Sterling." Luck had nothing to do with what was happening. But standing there, watching her scramble for words that wouldn't come, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Just a quiet, settled calm that comes from knowing the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Before diving into how everything unraveled, there's something worth mentioning. This channel is working toward hitting 5,000 subscribers, and stories like this one, real experiences from inside corporate walls where the official version never tells the whole truth, don't get shared enough. If these kinds of stories resonate, the subscribe button is right there. Not a demand, just an invitation to be part of reaching that milestone together. The name is Sterling, Principal Semiconductor Patent Specialist at Helios Tech Corporation, though that title doesn't really capture what the job actually entails. 14 years in the industry. 7 patents with my name in the filing. Dozens more where the research foundation came from months of work that never made it onto the final documentation. Background isn't anything remarkable. Middle-class upbringing in Minneapolis. Dad was a union electrician. Mom taught 5th grade. The kind of household where work ethic wasn't discussed, it was demonstrated. Every single day. There wasn't money for prestigious internships or legacy admissions. What there was, a clear understanding that nothing gets handed over without effort, and that the people doing the hardest work are often the ones getting the least recognition. That upbringing stuck, made it impossible to walk past the janitorial staff at Helios without learning their names, made it automatic to say thank you to the administrative assistants who keep entire departments functional while executives take credit for leadership. Empathy isn't about where someone comes from economically. It's about recognizing that everyone's got a story, everyone's fighting battles that don't show up on LinkedIn profiles, and that dismissing people because they don't have the right title or pedigree means missing out on perspectives that actually matter. Vanessa Hartwell never learned that lesson, and that oversight cost her everything. 18 months before that boardroom implosion, Helios Tech started developing something ambitious. An AI-driven system designed to predict semiconductor failure patterns before they happened. Predictive analytics in chip manufacturing. The potential applications were massive: data centers, medical devices, aerospace systems. Anywhere that chip failure meant catastrophic consequences. The executive team assigned the project to the Advanced Development Division, my division, and specifically to my team. There were 5 of us initially. Kenji Yamamoto handled the machine learning architecture. Priya Kapoor managed data integration. Liam O'Brien worked on the interface design. Rashida Ellis covered the security protocols. And I coordinated everything while handling the patent framework, making sure every innovation was documented, protected, and attributed correctly. We called the system Sentinel, not flashy but accurate. It watched, it learned, it predicted. For 11 months, we worked 70-hour weeks. Weekends disappeared. Holidays became theoretical concepts. The kind of immersive project that takes over every conversation, every thought pattern, every spare moment. Not complaining, that's the reality of development work when something genuinely groundbreaking starts taking shape. Vanessa Hartwell was the VP of Strategic Innovation. Our division reported up through her chain eventually, though for most of the development phase, she stayed distant. Occasional check-ins, quarterly reviews, the standard executive appearances where leaders skim the surface, nod appreciatively, then disappear back to higher-level concerns. That changed in month 9. Sentinel started producing results that caught attention beyond our division. Accuracy rates exceeding 94% in failure prediction. Response times fast enough to actually prevent damage instead of just documenting it. The European tech media got wind of preliminary results and published a speculative piece about the next generation of predictive AI emerging from American semiconductor firms. Suddenly, Vanessa's calendar had room for weekly meetings. She'd sweep into the lab space, always perfectly composed, designer suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. And she'd ask questions, detailed questions, technical questions that seemed thoughtful at first. How did the prediction algorithm weight historical data versus real-time inputs? What made our authentication protocols different from existing systems? Which specific elements were patent-eligible versus trade secret protection? Kenji appreciated the interest initially. At least someone upstairs actually cares about understanding the work, he'd said after the third meeting. Priya was more cautious. She's never cared before. Why now? Good question. Should have paid more attention to that instinct. Month 11 brought new developments. Helios Tech secured a major partnership with a consortium of European technology firms. Germany, Netherlands, Sweden. The deal meant expanding our operations internationally and, crucially, meant all our systems needed full GDPR compliance. General Data Protection Regulation. The European Union's comprehensive data privacy framework. Strict requirements. Serious penalties for violations, not the kind of thing to approach casually. The Sentinel system, by its nature, processed enormous amounts of data. Performance metrics, failure patterns, manufacturing specifications. Some of that data could theoretically be traced back to individual facilities, specific production runs, identifiable sources, which meant GDPR absolutely applied. Vanessa assigned me to handle the compliance integration personally. Your expertise in PAT frameworks translates well to regulatory compliance, she'd said during the briefing. Plus, you know Sentinel better than anyone. Make sure we're bulletproof before the European launch. So that became the focus. 3 months of working with international compliance attorneys, privacy specialists, and EU regulatory consultants. Restructuring data flows, implementing encryption, building audit trails, creating access controls, and then there was the key. GDPR requires something specific for systems processing sensitive data, physical security measures that prevent unauthorized access, even from within the organization. For AI systems operating internationally, that often means encryption keys that exist on-site, controlled by designated individuals, separate from cloud infrastructure. Sentinel's European compliance version needed exactly that. An on-site cryptographic key that initialized the system's data processing functions. Without that key, the AI could run calculations, but couldn't access, process, or transmit any actual operational data. The compliance attorneys were explicit. This key cannot be stored digitally where it could be remotely accessed. Physical possession, designated key holder. That's the only way to satisfy the EU auditors. Helios Tech designated me as the primary key holder with 2 backup holders in the European office, Klaus Bergman in Munich and Astrid Lindholm in Stockholm. Made sense. I'd built the compliance framework. I understood the system architecture. I'd be present for the initial launch and certification process. The key itself was a proprietary hardware device. Looked like a USB drive, but with embedded biometric verification and encrypted handshake protocols. Without it physically connected during system initialization, Sentinel's European version simply wouldn't process data. By design, by requirement. Vanessa attended the briefing where the key system was explained, took notes, asked clarifying questions, seemed completely comfortable with the arrangement. That should have been the first warning sign. Vanessa Hartwell never seemed comfortable unless she controlled every variable. 2 weeks before the European launch presentation, something shifted. Vanessa called a meeting. Just her and me. Conference room on the executive floor. The kind with abstract art that probably cost 5 figures and panoramic city views that reminded everyone of the hierarchy. She got straight to it. The board wants to trademark Sentinel before the European announcement. Media coverage means competitors will start circling. We need intellectual property protection locked down. Made sense. Standard procedure. The patent applications are already filed. I can coordinate with legal on the trademark registration. Shouldn't take more than Already handled. She slid a folder across the table. Filed this morning. Just need your signature acknowledging the corporate ownership structure. The folder contained trademark registration documents. Sentinel TM, registered to Helios Tech Corporation. Primary innovator listed. Vanessa Hartwell, not the team, not the division, her, individually named. This is incorrect. Kept the voice level. Professional. Sentinel was developed by the entire advanced development team. The patent applications list all 5 primary contributors. The trademark documentation should reflect the corporate hierarchy. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Perfectly pleasant, perfectly firm. I oversee strategic innovation. This project falls under my division. From a brand perspective, having executive-level attribution provides credibility to investors and partners. It's inaccurate. I'm not signing documentation that misrepresents. Sterling. The pleasant tone acquired an edge. Sharp, precise. You're luckier than you are smart. This opportunity to work on a high-profile project, that came from me. The resources your team received, my approval. The European expansion that's about to make Sentinel a flagship product, my negotiations secured that partnership. She leaned forward slightly. What you built is impressive. No one's disputing that. But turning innovation into market success requires strategic vision you simply don't possess. Sign the acknowledgement. Accept that some people create and other people understand how to make creation matter. The dismissal was complete. Casual, delivered with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Something crystallized in that moment, not anger, something colder, clearer. I need to review this with my own attorney before signing anything. Vanessa's smile tightened. Of course, take 48 hours, but understand, this trademark filing moves forward regardless. The only question is whether you want to be seen as a team player or an obstacle. The meeting ended. The folder stayed on the table, unsigned. 24 hours of digging revealed the full scope. Vanessa hadn't just filed for the Sentinel trademark. She'd positioned herself to present the system to the European partners personally. The launch presentation, the technical demonstration, the media briefing, all scheduled with her as the primary spokesperson. The visionary leader behind Helios Tech's revolutionary AI innovation. Kenji, Priya, Liam, and Rashida. Mentioned nowhere in the press materials. Footnotes in internal documentation. Invisible. The rage that information should have triggered didn't come. Instead, there was something else. A realization. Vanessa had studied Sentinel extensively. She understood the technology well enough to discuss it credibly. She'd positioned herself perfectly to claim credit. She'd maneuvered the corporate structure to support her narrative. But she'd made one miscalculation. Understanding a system isn't the same as understanding every operational requirement of that system. Especially requirements that seemed like minor technical details unless someone knew exactly why they mattered. The GDPR key had been mentioned once during a compliance briefing Vanessa attended. 90 minutes of technical regulatory discussion. The key itself occupied maybe 5 minutes of explanation. Physical security requirement. On-site initialization. Designated holder protocols. She'd taken notes. But had she truly absorbed what that meant? Had she understood that without that physical key, the Sentinel system she planned to demonstrate would be completely non-functional for data processing? Or had she assumed, the way executives often assume, that technical details sort themselves out, that systems work because they're supposed to work, that her authority meant automatic access to whatever she needed? The presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. Brussels, full board attendance, European partners, media presence, and Vanessa Hartwell didn't have the key. Wednesday afternoon, the message came through. Email from Vanessa's executive assistant. Routine request. Ms. Hartwell needs the Sentinel access credentials for tomorrow's presentation. Please forward all necessary login information and system access protocols by end of business today. Credentials. Login information, access protocols, not one word about the physical key. The response was carefully worded, professional, helpful. All standard access credentials attached. Note: Sentinel's European version requires on-site physical key for GDPR-compliant data processing initialization. Per compliance requirements established in October briefing, primary key is currently with designated holder myself and will be available in Brussels for official launch sequence following full regulatory approval. Backup keys held by Klaus Bergman, Munich, and Astrid Lindholm, Stockholm, for European operational redundancy. Happy to coordinate initialization sequence, timing with presentation schedule. Please advise. The email went unanswered. Thursday morning came. The flight to Brussels had been booked weeks ago for me and the rest of the development team. Scheduled to arrive Thursday afternoon in time for Friday's official launch and regulatory certification. But Wednesday evening, new messages arrived. Change of plans. Executive team handling initial presentation. Development team Brussels arrival rescheduled for Friday afternoon. Updated itinerary attached. Kenji called immediately. Did Vanessa just cut us from our own product launch? Looks that way. That's insane. She can't even run the full demonstration without. He stopped. Wait. She knows about the key requirement, right? It was mentioned. Whether she retained that information is another question. Priya's voice came through on the conference line. Scene, what are we doing about this? What were we doing? Good question. Option 1, send another email. More explicit, more direct. Warning, system will not function without physical key. Presentation will fail without designated key holder present. Option 2, make a phone call. Track down Vanessa directly. Explain the situation with absolute clarity. Ensure no possible misunderstanding. Option 3, do nothing. Provide exactly what was requested, access credentials, and let the situation unfold naturally. No interference, no sabotage, just the natural consequences of assumptions meeting reality. We're doing exactly what we were asked to do. Credentials were provided. Rescheduled flights were acknowledged. If additional support is needed, Vanessa knows how to reach us. Liam's laugh was quiet, slightly disbelieving. You're really going to let her walk into that boardroom without the key? I'm going to respect the revised schedule our VP provided. Nothing more, nothing less. The details of what happened Thursday morning in Brussels came from multiple sources. Klaus Bergman, who was present as the European technical liaison, Andrew Kessler, Helios Tech's CFO, who attended the board meeting, and eventually, from cell phone footage that somehow made it to several internal Slack channels before it could scrub it. The presentation started smoothly. Vanessa commanded the room the way she always did. Confident, articulate, presenting Sentinel as a revolutionary breakthrough in predictive AI, her revolutionary breakthrough. The European partners were impressed. Questions were thoughtful. Interest was genuine. Everything was proceeding exactly as she'd planned. Then came the demonstration portion. What we'll see now, Vanessa said, advancing to the next slide, is Sentinel's real-time analysis of semiconductor performance data, showing failure prediction with over 94% accuracy. She nodded to the tech support assistant managing the display systems. Bring up the live interface. The Sentinel login screen appeared, credentials were entered, the system authenticated, and then GDPR compliance verification required. Physical key authentication, NEIDED. Insert designated key device to proceed. The message filled the screen, bright red text, unmistakable. Vanessa's expression flickered, just for a second. Technical glitch. Give us just a moment. She turned slightly, speaking quietly to the tech assistant, inaudible to most of the room, but Klaus was close enough to hear. Override that. Use administrator access. There is no override, ma'am. The GDPR protocols require the physical key. It's a compliance mandate. Then get the key. The designated key holders are Sterling, Bergman, and Lindholm. Miss Sterling's in the United States. Mr. Bergman is here, but his backup key hasn't been activated yet per the launch sequence protocols. Miss Lindholm is in Stockholm. Vanessa's face remained composed, but something tightened around her eyes. She turned toward Klaus. You're telling me we can't run this demonstration? Klaus, to his credit, kept his expression neutral, professional. The system is designed to require physical key authentication for GDPR compliance. It's functioning exactly as specified. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday, after Miss Sterling's arrival with the primary key and completion of the regulatory certification sequence. One of the European partners spoke up. German accent, measured tone. Is there a compliance issue with this system? No, Vanessa's response came quickly, too quickly. Absolutely not. This is simply a timing coordination matter. The full demonstration will be available. The compliance alert triggered. Later analysis suggested it was an automated monitoring system, activated when Sentinel's European instance showed login attempts without proper key authentication. GDPR compliance monitoring isn't passive, it's active, real-time, designed to catch violations immediately. The screen changed, new message, different system entirely. EU GDPR compliance violation detected. Attempted unauthorized access to protected data systems. Regulation, EU, 2016/679 Article 32 breach. Preliminary penalty assessment, €4,700,000. Immediate investigation required. The amount appeared in bold, right there on the main presentation screen, visible to every person in that boardroom. Klaus described the silence as absolutely suffocating. Vanessa's face went white, not pale, white, ghost white, every trace of color draining like someone had opened a valve. Andrew Kessler stood up. The CFO's voice was dangerously quiet. Vanessa, what exactly is happening right now? There's been a misunderstanding. The system is flagging routine authentication as routine authentication that triggered a €4.7 million penalty. One of the board members, Aline or something, her voice cutting. For a system you've spent the last 30 minutes claiming was ready for European deployment, it is ready. The compliance protocols are functioning exactly as designed. This is a false flag because the system was accessed without proper authorization. The German partner again. His expression had shifted from interested to deeply concerned. This is not a minor issue. GDPR violations of this scale require immediate reporting to regulatory authorities. Our consortium cannot be associated with non-compliant systems. The meeting deteriorated rapidly from there. By Thursday afternoon, Brussels time, the situation had exploded into full corporate crisis mode. The European partners suspended the partnership agreement pending a complete compliance audit. The Helios Tech Board convened an emergency session to determine how a flagship product launch had turned into a multi-million-euro regulatory violation. And Vanessa Hartwell went from triumphant visionary to executive on very thin ice in the span of about 45 minutes. Friday morning, the development team's Brussels trip was reinstated. Urgent messages, immediate travel required, critical technical support needed for compliance remediation. The flight over was quiet. Kenji broke the silence once. Did you know that compliance alert would trigger? Knew it was possible. Unauthorized access attempts to GDPR-protected systems generate automatic monitoring flags. Whether it would escalate to a penalty assessment that quickly, that was less certain. Priya glanced over, but possible enough that you didn't warn her. Not a question, statement of fact. Warning was provided. Email specified key requirement. System documentation outlined protocols. Compliance briefings explained the framework. All information was available. What wasn't available was the assumption that details don't matter. Liam's voice was thoughtful. She really thought she could just walk in and run the system, that her authority meant automatic access. That assumption is common at executive levels. Systems are supposed to work because they're supposed to work. Technical requirements are details for other people to handle, until those details become the central issue. Rashida had been silent until then. What happens now? Now, the compliance audit happens. The system gets properly certified. The partnership gets salvaged if possible. And some conversations happen about trademark attribution and project credit. And Vanessa? That was the question, wasn't it? The compliance audit took 3 days. External auditors from a specialized EU regulatory firm. Complete system review, documentation analysis, interview process. Every member of the development team was interviewed. Separately, extensively. The questions were pointed. Who designed the GDPR compliance protocols? Who determined the key authentication requirements? Who was designated as key holder? Who was informed of these requirements? When? How? The email trail told most of the story. compliance briefings with full attendance records, technical documentation with distribution logs. The Wednesday email specifying key requirements sent directly to Vanessa's assistant with clear language about physical key necessity. What also emerged: Vanessa's trademark filing, her positioning as primary innovator, her restructuring of the presentation schedule to exclude the actual development team. The auditors were thorough, professional, and their preliminary report was damning. Compliance protocols were properly designed and implemented. Violation resulted from unauthorized access attempt by personnel lacking required authentication. Contributing factor: inadequate coordination between executive presentation planning and technical operational requirements. Corporate translation: Vanessa screwed up. Monday morning, a meeting, conference room, different from before. This one included Andrew Kessler, the CFO, Helena Morrison, Chief Legal Counsel, and Thomas Whitmore, the CEO himself. Vanessa was already seated when the development team arrived. Her expression was controlled, locked down. The kind of careful neutrality that comes from knowing the ground is unstable. Thomas opened the meeting. Direct. No preamble. "We're here to determine what happened in Brussels, why it happened, and how we prevent it from happening again. Starting with the trademark filing." He looked at Vanessa. "Explain why the Sentinel trademark lists you as primary innovator when the patent applications, which I've now reviewed personally, list 5 team members as co-inventors." Vanessa's response was practiced. Smooth. The trademark attribution reflects strategic oversight and executive leadership. The development work was absolutely a team effort, which the patents properly document. The trademark represents market-facing brand identity, where executive association provides inaccuracy. Helena cut her off. Legal counsel's expression was unyielding. Trademark filing requires good faith representation of origin. Claiming primary innovation credit for work you didn't personally perform exposes the company to potential fraud allegations. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Thomas turned to me. "Sterling, walk me through the Brussels situation. Why wasn't the physical key available for the presentation?" The presentation was originally scheduled for Friday, following completion of the EU regulatory certification process. The development team, including myself as primary key holder, was scheduled to arrive Thursday afternoon in preparation. Wednesday evening, those travel plans were revised, with development team arrival rescheduled to Friday afternoon. The presentation was moved forward to Thursday morning. "And you didn't communicate that the key was required." Communication was sent Wednesday afternoon specifying that Sentinel's European version required on-site physical key for GDPR-compliant operation. Email included explicit statement that primary key was with designated holder, myself, and would be available in Brussels for official launch sequence following regulatory approval. Offered to coordinate initialization sequence timing with presentation schedule. Helena leaned forward. "Do we have that email? Complete thread is in the compliance audit documentation." She pulled it up on her tablet. "Read it." Her expression tightened. "This is unambiguous. Key requirement clearly stated. Coordination explicitly offered." Thomas looked at Vanessa. "Did you see this email?" "It went to my assistant. There are hundreds of emails daily. Technical details are typically technical details that cost us a multi-million euro penalty and nearly destroyed a major partnership." Thomas's voice remained level, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "Vanessa, you positioned yourself as the expert on this system. You claimed innovation credit. You restructured the presentation to exclude the people who actually built Sentinel. And then you attempted to demonstrate technology you fundamentally didn't understand well enough to operate." "I understood the technology perfectly well. What I didn't account for was an overly rigid compliance protocol that is legally mandated by EU regulation." Helena again. "GDPR isn't optional. It isn't overly rigid. It's the law in every market we're trying to enter. And the protocols Sterling implemented are the only reason we have any chance of salvaging this partnership." The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Detailed breakdown of decisions made, timelines established, responsibility allocated. By the end, several things were clear. The Sentinel trademark would be refiled with accurate attribution. The European partnership would proceed, contingent on successful completion of the compliance certification, which happened 2 days later without incident. And Vanessa Hartwell's role would be restructured. Restructured is corporate language for demoted without using that word. Vanessa remained at Helios Tech, technically, but strategic innovation was removed from her oversight. She was reassigned to a newly created position, Senior Advisor for Special Projects. No direct reports, no budget authority. The kind of role where someone keeps their salary and title for legal protection purposes, but loses all actual power. Her office moved. Different floor, smaller, no panoramic views. The official company statement praised her years of valuable service and emphasized the organizational evolution to better align strategic functions with operational expertise. Translation. She got caught taking credit for work she didn't do, nearly tanked a major deal through negligence, and got pushed aside while maintaining enough corporate face to avoid a lawsuit. The development team was formally recognized. Company-wide announcement, individual bonuses, and critically, proper attribution on all Sentinel-related materials, presentations, and documentation. Kenji, Priya, Liam, Rashida, and myself, names in print. Credit where credit was actually due. The European launch happened 3 weeks later. Successfully, full regulatory certification, media coverage that actually interviewed the people who'd built the system. Klaus Bergman sent a message afterward. Much better when the people explaining the technology are the ones who actually understand it. Remarkable difference. 6 months later, Sentinel was operational across 4 European countries. The system worked exactly as designed. Vanessa Hartwell quietly exited Helios Tech, announced her departure to pursue other opportunities. LinkedIn updated with a vague consulting title, the standard exit for someone whose effectiveness in an organization had been permanently compromised. There's been time to think about everything that happened, not about whether justice was served, that question answers itself, but about what the whole experience actually revealed. The temptation is to frame it as vindication, the arrogant executive getting her comeuppance, and there's an element of that, sure. Actions have consequences, and claiming credit for others' work eventually catches up. But the real observation is simpler and broader. Vanessa Hartwell was skilled in many ways. Strategic thinking, partnership negotiation, corporate maneuvering, those abilities were real. What she lacked wasn't intelligence. It was respect. Respect for the work itself. Respect for the people doing that work. Respect for the details that separate functional systems from expensive disasters. She looked at the development team and saw interchangeable parts. People whose contributions could be absorbed, rebranded, and presented as her own without consequence. That perspective is common, especially at executive levels where distance from implementation creates the illusion that vision matters more than execution. You're luckier than you are smart. That statement revealed everything. The assumption that success was fortune rather than effort, that technical expertise was less valuable than strategic positioning, that the people building systems were less important than the people presenting them. What she missed, what that entire mindset misses, is that the details are the system. Compliance protocols, authentication requirements, technical specifications that seem minor until they become critical. Those details don't manage themselves. They result from countless hours of careful thought and deep understanding. Dismiss the people who understand those details, and you dismiss the foundation of operational success. When that foundation disappears, when the person with the physical key isn't there because she's been sidelined and underestimated, the entire structure collapses. Not from sabotage, from physics, from reality asserting itself over assumption. Kenji, Priya, Liam, and Rashida had different reactions in the weeks after Brussels. Kenji felt some sympathy mixed with memory of her taking our explanations as her own insights. Priya wondered how many other projects she'd claimed without public exposure of the truth. Liam pointed to the structural problem, executives being rewarded for taking credit until spectacular failure costs money. Rashida found validation in seeing consequences finally arrive. Different angles, same center. The dad who was a union electrician, the mom who taught 5th grade, They raise someone who understands that empathy and accountability aren't opposites. Someone can face appropriate consequences while still being recognized as human. Vanessa made choices rooted in arrogance. She paid the price for those choices. Both things are true. And it's possible to believe the consequences were deserved while acknowledging that watching someone's carefully constructed image shatter isn't purely satisfying. It's complex. 18 months after Brussels, Sentinel is deployed across 11 countries. The development team has grown to 8 people, more projects in development, higher profiles within the organization, and there's institutional memory now. Not because Vanessa's failure was officially publicized, the company line remained professional throughout, but because people talk. Stories spread through organizations like water finding cracks. Remember when that VP tried to demo the AI system without the encryption key and triggered a multi-million-euro GDPR violation right in front of the entire board? That story gets told during onboarding now. Gets referenced in meetings when someone suggests presentation schedules that exclude the technical experts. Gets invoked as shorthand for why understanding matters more than confidence. That's probably Vanessa's lasting legacy at Helios Tech, not the partnerships she negotiated or strategies she developed. The cautionary tale, the story of spectacular failure rooted in dismissing people who knew better. Harsh? Maybe, but also functional. Organizations learn through stories, and this particular story teaches something important about respect, expertise, and the dangers of confusing authority with competence. The experience shifted some things personally too. Career trajectory, certainly. Formal recognition for Sentinel opened doors that might have otherwise stayed closed. But also perspective. Less patience now for casual dismissiveness that treats technical expertise as interchangeable support function. Less willingness to let credit be misappropriated without pushback, not from anger, from clarity about value. The work matters. The people doing the work matter. Letting that be a race to serve someone else's narrative isn't professional courtesy. It's accepting a system that perpetually undervalues expertise in favor of positioning. Vanessa taught that lesson more effectively than she probably intended. Stories like this tend to get framed as David versus Goliath, underdog versus powerful executive, little guy winning against the system. That framing misses the actual point. This wasn't David versus Goliath. It was expertise versus assumption, preparation versus arrogance, reality versus the belief that confidence can substitute for competence. The system didn't care about organizational hierarchy. GDPR requirements function identically whether accessed by a junior developer or a senior VP. Technical protocols don't defer to authority, and that's the beautiful simplicity of well-designed systems. They work based on defined parameters, not power dynamics. Vanessa could have succeeded. The information was available. The expertise was accessible. The people who understood every detail of Sentinel were ready to support the presentation. All that was required was recognition that their expertise mattered. That technical details weren't obstacles to work around, but foundations to build on. That the people who'd spent 11 months developing the system might actually know more about operating it than someone who'd spent 11 weeks studying it for presentation purposes. That recognition never came. And so Brussels happened. The compliance alert triggered. The penalties appeared on screen in front of the entire board and partnership consortium, not because of sabotage, because of natural consequences flowing directly from choices made. The key was required. It wasn't there. The system functioned exactly as designed. Simple, inevitable, entirely preventable. That phrase keeps returning, entirely preventable. Everything that happened could have been avoided with one shift: respect for expertise. If Vanessa had respected the work enough to keep the developers central to the presentation, if she'd respected technical requirements enough to ensure key availability, if she'd respected compliance protocols enough to prioritize them over convenient scheduling, if she'd respected the people building the system enough to recognize their contributions rather than appropriating them, any of those shifts would have changed the outcome. None of them happened. And that choice, conscious or otherwise, cost her everything she'd tried to claim. The corporate world is full of stories like this. Situations where the official narrative diverges sharply from what actually happened. where credit flows upward while work flows down, where expertise gets dismissed until its absence creates crisis. Most of those stories don't get told, locked behind NDAs, buried in internal politics, or simply never shared because the people living them don't have platforms. This channel exists to share those stories, real experiences, actual consequences, the version of events that never makes it into company press releases. If that resonates, if these kinds of stories matter, hitting subscribe helps reach more people, gets closer to that 5,000 subscriber milestone, and signals that there's appetite for truth that doesn't come polished by PR departments. Not a demand, just an invitation. Because the more people understand how these dynamics actually work, how credit gets stolen, how expertise gets dismissed, how consequences eventually arrive, the harder it becomes to perpetuate systems that reward arrogance over competence. And maybe, somewhere, an executive thinks twice before telling the person holding the physical key their entire presentation depends on that they're luckier than they are smart. That would be progress worth building toward.